Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Pam Evans. I head up marketing and development for Family Service and Guidance Center here in Topeka, Kansas. As you all may know, we specialize in treating kids who are challenged with mental health issues, behavioral issues. And we're super, super glad you're joining us this evening. We know you all are busy. So thank you so much for taking the time with us today. We just a few housekeeping things. I'm sorry, I was checking my notes here. Few housekeeping things. If you need a certificate of participation, please jot your first and last name in the chat box for us, if you would, and we will gladly get those certificates of participation sent out to you tomorrow or at the very latest on Monday. And then also, please note, we are recording this session. Main reason being, we know a lot of parents are struggling to help their kids here in the community, and we want to continue to provide resources for all of you who have kids here in our community. So if you do not want, if you ask questions, you don't have to have your video on. And I will try to make sure that everyone is muted through the Q&A here tonight. So no further ado, this presentation, this month, the topic is depression. And we've got Miss Dana Thomas with us tonight, who is one of our seasoned and very, very caring professionals here at Family Service and Guidance Center. And we are just going to jump into the questions. So Dana, I don't know if you want to do a really quick introduction, and then we'll just jump right into questions.
Yeah, welcome everybody. I'm Dana Thomas. I am a clinician. I've been a clinician in the adult world and the children world for about the last 12 years or so. At Family Service, I do clinical work with kids. I do SED waiver evaluations, if you're familiar with what that is. I also manage case management staff, who are line staff that go out and help children like in schools or any other issue that they might be working on in a community setting or even in the home that need extra support. So I kind of dabble in a lot of different things that are going on here at the agency. So if you have any specific questions about stuff, I can hopefully kind of answer a systems question fairly easily if you were to have one of those. And this agency works closely with all different types of agencies throughout the state. So hopefully we can guide you in other directions as well if needed. Does anybody have any questions about education or? Okay, then like Pam said, we're talking about depression in children today, and we are ready to go. Pam, if you're ready to go, you ready for me to just start doing some questions?
Yeah, I would just jump in. We have received a lot of questions from folks who had registered. So yeah, why don't we just jump into those? First one was, my child has expressed concerns of not liking herself and that she didn't feel good enough. So do you have thoughts about best approach to helping her learn how to overcome those thoughts and, learning self-love?
That one can be hard because when you step back and look at the family system, you need to see if that is something that is just a general environmental thing. First and foremost, there's some self-reflection involved in everything that we do with our children in terms of helping them feel better. And so you have to kind of do a self-check first. Is that something I do? Is that something somebody else in the household does, that they've seen us, this is how we talk, this is how we communicate to others. So start there. And if we need to change just kind of the general dialogue throughout the home to be more positive, that's a place to start, just to help everybody who's in the home. The next steps would be to catch your child doing something that they are good at, that you absolutely know they're good at. And then, walk through, offer them that praise, and then walk through the different examples just in that one incident that you're involved in, that you've caught them doing well at. Walk through what you think they've done well in great detail, as many different things that you can point out that are positive, the better. Depending on the age of the child, you can also just sit down and ask them, why don't you feel good enough? Younger children may have a hard time understanding that question. For a younger child, you could ask something like, well, why is Johnny better, if they've made a statement about how they're not as good as somebody. And they might be able to grasp it that way. But in older kids, like the tweens and the teens, definitely just have a flat conversation of, why do you think you're not good enough? And be open, honest, genuine, and just listen. At that point, I wouldn't necessarily try to come back with examples as to why you want to change their mind. Just listen and hear what they have to say. And then after you've had some time to really think about that stuff, kind of develop your plan as how you want to go back and explain to them in this one specific example. So if little Susie says, I'm not good enough because my friend Sally is better at art than I am at school. That's one of her examples. When you're having the conversation with Susie, don't immediately say, well, I know you're good. This is what you need to do. You need to focus on this. Don't think about that. Just listen, and then come back later when you're both calm, in case for some reason it doesn't go well. Somebody gets emotional. That's not the time to be talking about things. Just let the emotions calm down and then talk some more. And then, continue to ask questions. Well, why do you think Sally's picture is better than yours? What do you like? If you had to pick something you liked about your picture, what do you like? And then build on that piece of things. And how do you improve what they're thinking about, what they're personally doing? And then you can just increase more at a time. Okay, well, we've decided we're good here. So what about over here? What's good over here? And just keep adding more evidence into their suitcase, basically, as to why they're good enough. You can try to convince somebody all day long that you think they're good enough, but you have to get them to see and understand based on their own evidence that they are good enough. And so you just have to keep giving examples, catch them doing things that are positive and, extraordinary, and use positive language.
Great. Great. So I probably should have started with this question, but could you speak a little bit about signs of depression? If I understand it correctly, it's signs might be different, varied on ages. We had one person just said, how can you tell if your child's depressed? One more specifically asked about high school age kids. Can you speak about, signs of depression?
High school age kids, typically they're gonna mirror more of an adult usually, unless for some reason that child has some developmental delays or some cognitive delay of some kind. They might show some regression towards a younger child. But typically in teens, you're going to see what you might see in adult, where their mood is just low or depressed, irritated a lot, short-tempered or snappy when they talk to you. They don't like to participate in anything anymore. They don't do anything they used to do anymore, or if they do, it's because mom and dad have forced me to. I'll go do this with the family, but I'm going to hate every minute of it type statements, kind of that stuff. Grades start to slip usually. If they were somebody who participated in sports or like a church group throughout the week, they don't want to do those things anymore because they don't find them enjoyable. And a lot of times they can say things like they feel empty inside or they feel hopeless. There's no purpose to what they're doing, that kind of stuff. So watch for those types of statements. And then obviously, as depression can progress, they can make statements about, feeling worthless or inferior, therefore there's no reason to live anymore, or I think about harming myself, or I should just complete suicide or end it all. I mean, they can say it a ton of different ways. But if they say something that immediately raises a red flag for you, that you're like, that's just really out of their norm to say something like that, pay attention to that, because you know your kid, you're the expert. So those types of things. And as you get towards the more severe stuff of the talking about death or the fixations on death or suicide, definitely start asking for advice or asking for help from somebody on, what do you think about this? Should I be looking for somebody or something like that?
Yeah. And you touched on another one of the questions here. One person asked, so what's the best way or a good way to tell if a child is being sad, just, it's maybe a one time or just kind of, circumstances of a bad day, or is at what point do I think parents, it's hard to know, when should I go get my son or daughter evaluated?
This is a very interesting time of year to ask that question, because depression can present in many different ways, and the amount of time that it can last for an individual is also very unique and independent to the person having the experience. There are some people who experience seasonal affective disorder where they feel very depressed this time of year because we just don't have a lot of sunlight. Usually the weather's not great, so it keeps you inside. You're not as active as normal, so you're not getting the exercise that you typically do. And that can lead to people having a down or depressed mood, especially during the winter. But as spring comes on, they tend to feel better, and they kind of get back into their normal routine, and things are back to normal, and they feel great again. That's not to say if you have seasonal affective disorder, doesn't mean you shouldn't go talk to somebody if you feel like you need to, because those can be really low lows, even though it lasts kind of a shorter amount of time. For a typical depression case, as I would refer to it, you start out where it just seems like I've got the blues. The past couple of weeks or maybe the past couple of months, I don't feel myself, but I'm still able to get up and, go through the motions, and I get everything done. And then just kind of as you go, week by week, month by month, the fun of things doesn't return. The wanting to be social and laugh and participate in things doesn't tend to return. Everything feels like a giant chore. Usually hygiene decreases, because even just the simple task of taking a shower, brushing your teeth, all of that kind of stuff, it's a big deal, and it takes every ounce of energy you have to get those things done. So when you're hitting that level of stuff, it's time to start possibly talking to somebody. And it's okay to start with friends and family, or a trusted person, to say, hey, what do you think? Do you think this is going to pass, or do you think I should potentially go seek some professional advice?
Very good. Very good. Kind of along the same lines, how can I ensure my child will ask for help when he or she really needs it? She said, she says she tries to ask questions and let him know that, she's here for him, available to talk, but he doesn't talk about his feelings very much.
Yes. As a mom, I've experienced this one, which doesn't necessarily make it easier being a therapist either. I find that more frustrating, actually. You have to figure out a way they will talk to you. I've also helped families through this where we've had some lower functioning children who have really had a hard time to find the words of how they feel. So if they knew they weren't feeling right in the way that they determined it, they had a code word that they would tell their parent. Like I had one family, they randomly chose popcorn. When something was off with the mood or they just didn't feel right, they had a bad day, but they weren't sure how to start the conversation, because that's usually the hardest part, is initiating the conversation. That she would just go up to mom and say popcorn, and then she would go to her room, and when mom would, if, depending on how serious it was, mom would either follow and they would go talk, or mom would give her a little bit of time to calm down or collect herself, and then they would talk it out. So, I mean, you can always implement a code word that just means, I don't feel right, I need to talk. So, feel free to use that idea. I've also had families where, and this is mostly for the teen guys that have done this, where they, again, verbalizing the words is really hard for them. So they will talk through text. I know it's weird. You could be sitting in the same room, but they will tell you a multitude of things by texting them, sitting at the other end of the couch, compared to actually having to form words. It just feels a little bit safer. Usually that maybe doesn't feel quite as real, that they're really having to experience it and admit that, maybe I'm not strong enough, or they might view themselves as weak or crazy. I hear that one all the time. I'm crazy if I'm depressed, so I can't have that. I can't admit that I have that. So if in any way you can get them to talk to you. I also had another family that I saw where she wouldn't speak at all, but she would write volumes on paper or draw pictures or a combination. And so she would just go to work on that and hand it off to mom. Mom would review and process, and mom was able to ask questions, but she wouldn't respond verbally. She would put it back in writing or through a picture. So there's all different kinds of techniques you can try.
Okay, good. Another question from a mom asks, and you've touched a little bit on this, but some of the common causes, if you will, of depression, and maybe if you could touch on ones that we might not necessarily think could be causes of depression. Yeah.
Okay. Well, outside of the big ones of like a loss of a family member or parents separating or divorcing, I don't know if anybody considers COVID a big one or not, but just the social isolation that COVID has caused us has really impacted mood and depression with people. Watching their parents go through things like the extra stress that COVID has caused within a family system, like with people losing jobs or not being able to work because they've been sick. So therefore the home might be struggling financially. Watching a parent and not being able to help them, feeling like they should have to help them in some way, but they're not old enough to, or they don't understand how to. That actually has been a big one. Issues at school, But first off, in the academic realm of things, if they don't understand something and they're one of those anxious kids that, or they just refuse to ask questions because they don't want to be judged or, appear to be stupid or like they don't get it or behind the rest of the class, that typically can tend to snowball into some type of depression because they get so far behind. Because usually the parent doesn't figure out what's going on because there's so many other children that the teachers, have to manage, that it's not always a timely thing where the parent figures out there's a problem. And so by the time the parent figures that out, it's usually a bigger deal. There's the kid is really, really far behind in work. There's a mountain of makeup work that they have to complete if they want to potentially move on to the next grade. And that's very overwhelming, which then spirals even farther down into depression because you have no motivation to do it in the first place. So having to do current work and makeup work is just even more overwhelming, which will create more depression. And then bullying. I know, bullying is a big topic. We probably haven't talked much about it lately just because COVID has kind of ruled everything that is in media and all of that kind of stuff lately. But bullying is still hardcore out there. I was hearing about some incident at my kid's school from her yesterday on a dance class. And it's still out there every single day. Cyberbullying, in person, all of that stuff. And again, they may not tell you that it's happening because they feel like they should be able to handle it themselves. Or in this situation, they were doing something they knew they weren't supposed to be doing on the internet. And if they told us what was happening on the internet that they were doing, they knew they were going to get in trouble, first off, for being where they were. And then, so keeping that a secret, and then it just snowballing from there where I'm going to get in trouble, plus this bad thing happened or was said and I don't know what to do with it. And so they just clam up and it festers. So yeah.
Okay. No, that's good. I want to encourage everyone who's on the Zoom. If you have, we want to make sure that you get your specific questions answered too. So feel free, unmute. And if you're, comfortable with that, if you're not, feel free to use the chat. I haven't seen any specific chat questions come in on the chat yet, but I am keeping an eye on that. But does anyone have any questions they would like to ask of Dana so far?
I would like to ask a question of Dana.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
When you identify a child that has social anxiety and depression as a result of being homeschooled and isolated pretty much due to COVID, what kind of tips and ideas can you give to a parent to kind of help them understand that's where that child is and to help them move forward?
That's a tough one because it's really hard to tell a parent this is what we need to do in terms of getting them out of the house and go experience things and get them out of the comfort zone so they can learn that they can manage the anxiety to then help manage the depression with a pandemic going on. Because being around people is the part that is scary and potentially can make you sick. So you have to gauge the comfort level of the family first and what the parent is willing to do. If you can figure out how to get them into, if the parent's absolutely refusing to let the child leave the home for fear of the child getting sick, see if there's a way that they could participate in a monitored chat of some kind where they can have peer interaction in a virtual way. There has to be some type of monitoring happening by an adult in there because that stuff can go sideways real fast.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. I didn't think about the monitoring part of it. That could be helpful. Thank you.
Sure. If they're willing to let them do things outside just because, the fresh air, stuff like that. They could go, be with a friend outside, everybody masked up type thing, but, still have some distance. I would definitely encourage that, because just being outside and having physical activity is so good for somebody with depression. Doesn't matter who you are.
Anybody else have specific questions thus far?
Also,
No.
if you, for whatever reason, would like to remain anonymous, you can send the question directly to Pam or I as well, if that is more comfortable for you.
Great point. Okay, so I'll keep a watch on the chat and on the messages, but we still do have quite a few different questions, and some of these may be tougher to address. But how can I recognize depression in a child with autism? I know that's really specialized, but thoughts?
It is. And I did see a question pop up, so please make sure we get that one on there too. Okay, let me start with this. I am not our resident expert on autism. However, in the children that I've worked with, when it comes to autism, their expression of depression tends to be very similar to that of a younger child, in terms of you see more of the aggressive outbursts, oppositional, just absolute refusal. Sometimes they're so aggressive that they will, they'll hit, kick, bite, all of that kind of stuff, just because they don't have the words, or their sensory levels are so overwhelmed they can't slow it all down to get the words. So they tend to have more of the physical outburst and the emotional dysregulation that you would see from a younger child, from the ages about, I would say 4 to 7 to 8, depending on the cognitive, rather than the kind of I'm sad stuff that you would see with an older child.
Okay, very good. That's helpful.
If
And kind of, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if there were very specific questions about that and that person is on here, please send it directly to Pam, and I can also run something by our autism expert as well to see if she has any thoughts about making sure you're seeing depression versus something that could just be part of the autism.
Thank you. Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. So the question that came in was, how do I identify depression specifically in preschool aged children?
Okay, I have a couple of these too at my house. It's very difficult. In general, younger kids, like 2 to 3 to 4-ish, typically aren't wired to have depression. They're so engrossed in their environment and learning everything around them, language, how things work, logic, all of that stuff is happening. That they're really not wired to have depression. Usually something has to happen in the environment that would lead to them to have basically episodes, significant mood shifts. If there's a fear, an unusual onset, all of a sudden fear of something, then I would say something needs to be explored there. But really super young kids, they typically don't go there in terms of depression. But if you're going to see something that's out of the element for a toddler up to like a young child, up to 6-ish, you're going to see active anger outbursts. They just can't handle hearing the word no. Outside of a normal tantrum, we're talking significant, multiple times a day, lasting for 30 minutes to, I've had some poor families where they last a couple of hours. They're, those poor people. It's not a typical tantrum. So if you have a specific question about that, like if you've noticed something weird, preschool children really are typically happy-go-lucky. I want to go learn about my environment and, explore the world. They're usually happy to do that. So there could be lots of other things going on in terms of like maybe there's an anxiety basis or something, or a trauma has happened that maybe needs to be explored. Just depression in somebody that young just isn't typical.
Okay.
At least in my experience.
Yeah, no, very good. And you've been doing this for quite a while, so. What action steps can I take for a kiddo who struggles to do things on his own?
Okay, sorry, my mind went in two different directions, very different directions there. So I had to pick which path I was going to take. Okay, the first thing I would do is again, this involves self-reflection. Look back over as they were or are a toddler, what you have done for them historically. Have they kind of, been at the train table and they're like, hey, will you go get me this? Will you go get me that? And, no big deal if you were the parent that's like, sure, yeah, let me go get you that. And now that they're older, we need to break that cycle. That's fine. But we need to make sure that conversation happens. If they're older, they understand the changes that are being made. That would help that transition happen better. To just sit down and say, hey, I've done this for you for a long time. You're now old enough to do these things yourself. So this is what the new rule is going to be. And so now whether that's your history or not, fine. From there, you can go to just have the basic conversation of, hey, you're 5 now. You're able to go in and get your own snack. So every time that you can go in and get your own snack, we can earn a sticker. And if you can get five stickers out of 7 next week, we'll go do something fun. We'll go to the park for 30 minutes. You have to basically give them the reward, and you have to make sure it's something that they'll work for. And it doesn't have to be monetary. Please understand that. You don't have to dangle the carrot or the reward for your child that involves money or spending lots of money or taking lots and lots of your time. At my house, one of the rewards is you get, we do knuckles, My toddlers, when they do something super exciting, their reward is they want to come, give me the knuckles. So to them, that's their reward. They don't need the sticker. So please understand that there are ways to build a reward chart to promote the independence without having to spend tons of money.
No, that's great point. Thank you for bringing that up, because I think, a lot of us as parents, that's kind of our immediate where we go. And we don't necessarily think of the other ways that work just as well.
Most of the time, what they want from you is your time. And I know that's one of the hardest things to do. But if they get their 5 out of 7 stickers and they want to play a board game for 15 minutes, give them the board game. Saves you a trip to Walmart.
Yeah, right. Okay. This one is on the more serious side. And I have personally experienced this too. Out of depression, kids sometimes say things like, I wish I were dead.
Yeah.
This parent says, how can you tell, is that one of those times that they were just maybe saying that for the attention or for the shock factor versus something more. Can you speak to that?
Yes, I can. This goes back to you being the resident expert on your children. If the first time this pops out of somebody's mouth, always take it seriously. But then explore, where did they hear this? If this is a new thing, why is this happening now? These are the things you need to start thinking about. And what is it they're really trying to get from the statement? Do they really feel this way? And if so, we'll talk about that in a second. Or is this an attention getter because maybe they didn't like my answer and they're, I have a lot of parents tell me they're just saying that because they're trying to hurt me. So you need to also gauge, what is your reaction to them saying a statement like that? So once we can kind of figure out where they learned it, if it's being modeled at school or at home, how to alter environments so that everybody's using more appropriate language. So if I'm mad at a decision that was made by my parents and I have to go clean my room, and in the middle of my fit, I say, I should just kill myself because my room's never clean enough for you. Did I just say that out of anger, or do I really feel like I'm going to kill myself? So most of the time, when they're saying those things in anger or during an emotional outburst, it's just the emotion talking and they don't know what else to say and it just comes out. However, talking about suicide or self-harm is something you always need to take very seriously, and until you know that they are in a safe place and they're not going to do something to harm themselves or anybody around them. So it comes with experience, unfortunately. The hardest part to do is to have to listen to those words as a parent, because if they know, even if they don't mean it, but they know it gets a reaction from you, they will continue to say it. And depending on the age of the child, you need to redirect those statements. If you know that's not what they mean, and I'm just angry because I have to go clean my room, then you redirect them to say, use the words, I'm angry because I have to go clean my room. And I know this is kind of childish, but even if they're a teenager, make them repeat it. That, I'm going to go kill myself because I have to clean my room is not an appropriate expression of you having to go clean your room and being mad about it. You need to say, I'm angry, because that is actually what is happening. They need to understand the impact of that statement and what it has on you and them. And if they really are serious, how it could get them into a different environment, like a hospital, when they're really just mad they have to clean the room. So that's a hard one, especially for parents, because it's very hard to hear your children say those phrases. If you're ever in question about whether or not your child is serious, have them evaluated by somebody and let them decide if they think they're safe versus, really being serious about potentially harming themselves.
Yeah, and I do want to make sure everyone on this call knows that FSGC provides crisis services 24/7, 365 days a year. If you ever find yourself in a crisis situation, if your child, teen, is threatening to harm themselves or others, please do not hesitate to call our main number, no matter what time, day, or night. It is just FYI, it's 232-5005. It's always better safe than sorry. Always, always. When you said something that really, when you talk about, even though it might sound childish to have your child, or even if it's your teenager, repeat that back to you. A couple years ago, well, gosh, now it's a few years ago, we we're having a lot of youth suicides in our area. And we started at that time a youth suicide prevention initiative. And when we got the high school students together from all different high schools across Shawnee County, one thing, we were asking the kids, what are they seeing? What are they feeling? One common factor was the students said, people have to stop texting. I'm just going to kill myself, or there's all different kinds of terms, and they took it back to their peers, saying, your words have power. Please don't use those unless you mean it. So talking with your children and redirecting and reinforcing hey, that's not an appropriate way to express you just being mad about having to clean your room or do whatever. That really has stuck with me. Yeah. There was another question. Actually, there's several, but before I get back to these questions, let me see if there are any other questions here, and I'm going to pause so someone could unmute if you have further questions.
If somebody has a question, jump on. I just was going to, while you're looking, I was going to speak a little more to that. I've done a lot of different jobs here at this agency. And one of them has been working in crisis. And we had kids come in all the time that were making statements about suicide and self-harm, and they wouldn't, talk about how they were just kidding or they were really just mad because they had to do something else. They would stick with it, all the way through to the end. No, this is really how I feel. This is really what's going on. And so they would get to my office and I'm just like, okay, if this is for real, you are going to a hospital right now. You're going to go away from your family. You can't have basic things like shoelaces or a belt. I mean, you have to wear these outfits, that they can make sure you cannot hurt yourself with. You don't have basic freedoms. You get food that's served to you. You might not even get a fork, depending on which hospital you end up in, because of the potential harm to self. So are you really serious? Are you really in danger? Or are you really just pissed off at mom because she made you clean your bed? And sometimes having those conversations with a third party person, they can say, okay, yeah, you're right. I don't want to go anywhere. I want to go home to my bed. I'm just pissed. And then we had others that just, they wouldn't let it go. And after their one stay, they were able to start saying the words of, yeah, I'm mad. I don't want to go back there. I don't know how else to express it, but I don't want to go back there. So let's figure it out.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. One other, this really isn't a question, but school-based interventions for kids with depression. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It really depends on how the depression is impacting school and the school environment. If it's in a social way, or academic way, or all kinds of things. School has a lot of resources. I know they don't have a lot of staff, and the staff that they do have are very overwhelmed and overworked and underpaid. And so they're moving a little bit slower for the identified kids that need the extra support, but they're doing the best they can. Utilize the counselor. If they need a weekly or even daily meeting with the counselor. I met with a young gal last week where she had extreme mood dysregulation, most of it starting with anxiety, but then it cascaded into depression. She was, significant school refusal that led to depression. And so she goes and meets with the counselor first thing every day to get her acclimated to her day. And then she goes back and checks in at lunch. And so we've been able to keep her in school all semester. Whereas compared to last semester, she was there for maybe a total of 20 days. So they're willing to do what they need to do and accommodate children and parents as they have staff available to do it. So definitely start with the school counselor, start with the social worker. If it's a social thing and you feel like maybe there needs to be some type of guided experience at recess where we can try to get a peer, a model peer student with this other child to show them how to engage with other students so that they don't feel isolated, so that they can make friends. There are different ways to go about doing that. There are groups that teach you how to have social skills and create friendships and start conversations and all of that kind of stuff. Definitely reach out to them. And to do those things, you don't necessarily have to have an IEP or a 504 in place. There are a lot of schools that will help with accommodations without having to have all of those legal plans in place.
Okay, very good. I'm going to share my screen real quick, and Dana, you can help me make sure that I'm sharing the right screen here. Can you see that at all? Here, hold on.
It's over to the side. I mainly see your desktop. There it is.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to share this resource with everyone. We had one person ask what resources are available for my teen to pursue on his own. 7 Cups is a free, confidential, anonymous app, smartphone app, and it's accessible on of course regular computers as well. But this is a free resource that we offer to Shawnee County teens ages 13 to 17 when they just need to talk. Let's say someone's recently broken up with their girlfriend or boyfriend, or maybe they just had a huge fight with mom or dad, or they're struggling in school, anything that is just stressing them out, quite honestly. It may be that they need to talk to someone and parents aren't around, or maybe they don't necessarily want to talk to parents about it, but would like to get something off their chest before it becomes a crisis situation. So this is a tool, a free resource that's available. This card, there's a QR code right there, but we have this information on our website, and I will drop in the actual website. If kids, or I should say teens, they're on the phone, on their smartphones all the time, and I'm also guilty of it too. But it's as easy as downloading an app, and they sign up, and there are trained listeners. They are volunteer listeners. There's a bunch of games. There's videos. Just a lot of really good resources to help support kids when no one might be around. So I wanted to make sure we shared this information, and tomorrow we'll send this information out, as well as Dana reminded me before we started that we have we have a information sheet, a fact sheet about depression, and there's a lot of great information. We'll attach that fact sheet to the email that we send out to you all, again, just so that you have more resources, more tools in your toolbox, because Lord knows, we know it's not easy, especially these days. let's see, Dana, what other? So we also had another one, and I know we're starting to get a little close, but this person said, my 5-year-old grandson is just struggling with his emotions. His grandmother recently died, even though they weren't really close, but still feels sad and is expressing it in anger. This person is able to communicate with him better than most of his family. So they're asking, how can they help the family understand how to deal with him when he lashes out in anger and can't use his words? So it sounds to me like this person's asking, how can they help maybe mom or dad or grandma in the house? I know that you're kind of crossing lines and it's kind of sticky, but thoughts?
Yeah, that does get kind of sticky. First off, you got to figure out where the parents are in their grief process. Are they able to listen and to respond in a way that's not going to be even more triggering for the child? If that's not possible, then if you're able to calm them down, I would recommend you continue to do so until one of the other parents gets to a point where they're better able to help him and stay emotionally calm themselves. There are some great books for younger kids on how to process death, how to understand it. I don't have any titles off the top of my head, but if that's something that you're interested in, we can definitely try to get you some ideas on that. There are a couple of places around town that have grief groups for families, especially families with children, that help you, and you don't necessarily have to have previously been involved with them, like Midland, I think, has one, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your family's already had to have used Midland Hospice for anything else. They have a really good group for children and families to help you learn how to communicate about death and that it's okay to talk about it. And it seems like such a big, scary topic when it really doesn't have to be. And it's okay to cry together, to model the sadness. That's absolutely fine. In fact, you should. It's okay, if grandma's passed away and mom's really, really sad about it, it's okay for the two of them to sit there and cry together and let the child see it's okay to cry when I'm sad. That's perfectly fine. And then after we have our moment of being sad, then, we decide what we're going to do next and we get up and we do it together. So modeling appropriate emotion by the parent if they're to a point where they can do that. Checking out some potential books that would help explain it to the child. Art is always a good one. Depending on, religious background for a family, there might be some resources that, a local church or congregation that you guys might belong to that could potentially offer some resources that help explain it to somebody based on what your belief system is. If it's something that sticks around and it's really starting to impact everybody's world and it just doesn't seem to be getting any better after, I'd say probably 3 months, maybe it's time to have the core family unit seek some help from a professional or evaluation to see, which part of it is really sticking on strong and how do we help you work through it and talk about it and accept the passing of this person and understand that it's going to be okay.
Great information. Very good. And I see that you dropped in the National Parent Helpline, the website, and the toll-free number. So I will also make sure that gets sent out along with the fact sheet and the information about the 7 Cups teen resource. looks like we have just a few minutes left. I'm going to be quiet and see if anyone else has questions that that you want to ask before we wrap this up tonight.
Back to that teen question on what they can do to help themselves. Again, if they're actively going to school, use those resources. There is somebody at the school who is trained to do therapy. They can do therapy with your child while they're there. So if that's something they're willing to do, please do that. If there's not somebody actually on campus, there's somebody in the district that they can track down and they can come set up scheduled appointments with your child for that. They can also call our crisis line if there's a problem, just because you don't have to be a client here to call our crisis line. That's absolutely true. So if they're having an issue, they're feeling poorly about something, they can call our crisis line to talk to a clinician, and they can be assessed for their safety by somebody at that point. And then if somebody needs to find a parent, they'll make that judgment call and can do that too. But they can also just call and talk about a situation too. I can bring up my questions too and see if there's something.
Yeah.
Oh, divorce was a big topic of a few questions. Let's touch on that really fast for a second.
Sure.
The biggest thing about divorce and kids, making sure they understand it's not their fault, that mom and dad don't get along, that there's nothing they could have done to change it. There's nothing they can do going forward to change it. And then the other piece, unfortunately, that we see a lot is parents trying to use the kids to manipulate each other back and forth. Try not to do that if at all possible. I know some divorces can get really nasty. And that's no judgment. It just is what it is. So do your best to protect your children from that type of stuff. Talk again, model appropriate emotions. If you're sad, you're going through a divorce and you need to cry about it, that's okay. They're probably sad and want to cry about it too. Do it together and let them know it's okay to show your emotion. But again, make sure they know it's not their fault and that it will still be okay going forward.
As you're looking there at the list, just want to let everyone know, if you know of any parent or anyone that maybe intended to participate tonight, these recordings are posted on our website at fsgctopeka.com/ well, you go to that main website and there's a big blue button on the right-hand side that says parenting resources. That's where we will post the recording. So that is, again, we try to continue to provide as many resources and as much help as we can for parents. Next month's topic of the month is anxiety. And, it sometimes, a lot of times it does go hand in hand with depression. And we see so many kids who are struggling with anxiety. So that is going to be a really great topic. If you're on Facebook, please follow our page because this year's a little different. We're posting short videos about the topic of the month the first 3 weeks. And then the last Thursday, we do these Q&As. So just wanted to try a little bit of a different format and hope you find that helpful. Do you see anything else that we missed, Dana?
Yeah, I have two things that I
Okay.
missed. One of them is in response to I'm not sure I did this one justice, or maybe it got really convoluted in the middle of my explanation, but negative self-talk, big thing, especially in depression in kids, especially with all the bullying, they start to mimic the words, all that kind of stuff. This is just as simple as when you're trying to teach your toddler or 3 or 4 year old to stop whining, and you make them re-ask you something in a big girl voice, or however you have said it to your children. Same thing when it comes to negative self-talk. First, you need to teach your child, okay, that type of talk is not accepted here, because we both know that's not true. We both know you're a great kid, and here's why. So what's a different way to say that I'm sad about how this happened or how this played out, that I didn't win first place in my race? How do you say I didn't win first place in my race without saying I should just go die? That kind of stuff, or I'm terrible. You have to model the exact sentence you want them to say. You know, I'm really good at racing. This time I didn't win, and that's a bummer. But next time I'm going to work hard and I'm going to do it. And you have to make them repeat it, just like, you know, when you're trying to get your toddler to stop whining. And you have to, every time they do it, you have to, okay, now how do we say that appropriately? Type stuff to get what you need. I know it's kind of like a broken record, but mastering the skill, constant repetition. And eventually you will see it start to have a change. And when you notice that they do it on their own, make a big deal about it in a positive way. Big deal. Hey, that was great. You talked about it and how you were feeling. You didn't say anything, you know, degrading about yourself. Let's go get some ice cream. I'm so proud of you. If that's what they want. Actually, it's more like if that's what you want. If you feel like ice cream, use it for that. Or, you know, you don't have to do that chore today because you were able to make this change. All that kind of stuff. Take away something they don't really want to do. They'll love that. Okay, so self-talk. Model exactly what it is you want them to say. Make them practice and repeat it when they don't follow through. And the other one down here was, try small things to lift their spirits, but these ideas are constantly rejected. Okay. And this kind of goes back to the kids that won't talk to you either. For whatever reason, they may just not be ready to talk. And that's okay. Everybody does it in their own time. Just sit with them. Watch a TV show together. If they don't want to talk to you during dinner, that's okay. Eat dinner together. You can do it in silence, or you can tell them, you know, silly little dad jokes or whatever it is that you do to try to break the silence, and they're going to roll your eyes and be ridiculous. But the fact that you are sitting in the same room with them speaks volumes. The fact that you ask, how was your day? They may not respond. At some point, if you continue to just be in the same room and by being physically present, show your support to them, they will eventually talk most of the time.
Excellent tips and information. I hope everybody at least got a good nugget or two of information, or maybe it was just kind of reframing some thoughts. We appreciate your time, and I know we're over. Dana, thank you so much for your time, and for everyone who tuned in. Appreciate you taking the time to add tools to your parenting toolkit. It says a lot about you. You want to be a good parent, and kudos for you taking the time. We're always here if you need us. Again, thank you, and I hope you all have a good rest of the evening. week and weekend. Take good care.